Hello, hello. Hope everybody is doing well. Hello. Updating partnership starting next year. It's like double hour requirements. That's crazy. No, I did not hear that. I just got off work not like 20 minutes ago. So, hey, what's going on, JB? It's good to see you. Found my 5x5 cube. And, but I wanted to do something a little bit different. And, last Discord read after Mary Bear left, I was like, well, we're all still here. Let me just bust out a poem real quick. And it's been far too long since poetry's been on the channel. So I figured that instead of solving the cube, well, at least not at first, we would read a poem from somebody else. And the somebody is Lewis Carroll. And for some reason, I've had the poem The Walrus and the Carpenter stuck in my head for like a couple days now. And I thought, you know what? That's perfect. So while we wait for everybody to join us, I figured we would read The Walrus and the Carpenter, as featured in Alice in Wonderland, or The Stories of the Curious Oyster. So let me know if that would be a fun way to pass the time. Uh, all right. We got white. We got yellow. It's got to be over here, though. I should probably turn off my top chat, too. But how is everybody doing? Let me know how your Mondays were. I know Lolo had a rough work day. I hope the night is proving to be better. Ooh. Right. And last two. Uh-huh. Yeah, I took a media nap when I got home. How was your night? Or how was your night? Eating popcorn milkshake to wash it down on the TV. Excellent. Well, thank you. I hope your dinner is good. Your snacks, of course, as always, they are. I'm gonna do this, and then we're gonna do this. That's gonna give me that. Relax mode activated. What's going on, JR? You're just in time, fam, because we got our center solved. And this is our 5x5 Rubik's Cube. Now we're going to go and match up all of our sides and get this solved. But before we do that, typically we give it about 10, 12 minutes before we start reading the story and the title. But I wanted to kick this off by reading a poem. And I wanted to read The Walrus and the Carpenter. It is by Lewis Carroll from Alice in Wonderland. And yes, I These aren't permanent fixtures as of now. They will be on the wall eventually, but yeah, this is where I like them while I'm reading so I can see them, and they got my back. So once again, fam, super appreciate you. It is really good to see you. And I hope you get to take the night off and just relax, chill with the Ghost fam, and read a couple of stories. So let me go ahead and do this as people are coming in, grabbing their favorite drink, and hunkering down for relaxing and reading with the Pokey Ghost. We're going to read The Walrus and the Carpenter by Lewis Carroll. The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all its might. He did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright. And this was odd, because it was the middle of the night. The moon was shining sulkily because she thought the sun had got no business to be there after the day was done. It's very rude of him, she said, to come and spoil the fun. The sea was wet as wet could be, the sands were dry as dry. You could not see a cloud because no cloud was in the sky. No birds were flying overhead, there were no birds to fly. The walrus and the carpenter were walking close at hand. They wept like anything to see such quantities of sand. If this were only cleared away, they said it would be grand. If 7 maids with 7 mops swept it for half a year, do you suppose, the walrus said, that they could get it clear? I doubt it, said the carpenter, and shed a bitter tear. Oh, oysters, come walk with us, the walrus did beseech. With a pleasant walk, a pleasant talk along the briny beach. We cannot do with more than 4 to give a hand to each. The eldest oyster looked at him, but never a word he said. The eldest oyster winked his eye and shook his heavy head, meaning to say he did not choose to leave the oyster bed. But 4 young oysters hurried up, all eager for the treat. Their coats were brushed, their faces washed, their shoes were clean and neat. And this was odd because, they hadn't any feet. 4 other oysters followed them, and yet another 4. And thick and fast they came at last, and more and more and more, all hopping through the frothy waves and scrambling to the shore. The walrus and the carpenter walked a mile or so, and then they rested on a rock, conveniently low, and all the little oysters stood and waited in a row. The time has come, the walrus said, to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot, and whether pigs have wings. But wait a bit, the oysters cried, before we have our chat, for some of us are out of breath, and all of us are fat. No hurry, said the carpenter. They thanked him much for that. A loaf of bread, the walrus said, is what we chiefly need. Pepper and vinegar besides are very good indeed. Now, if you're ready, oysters dear, we can begin to feed. But not on us, the oysters cry, turning a little blue. After such kindness, that would be a dismal thing to do. The night is fine, the walrus said. Do you admire the view? It was so kind of you to come, and you are very nice. The carpenter said nothing, but cut another slice. I wish you were not quite as so deaf. I've had to ask you twice. It seems a shame, the walrus said, to play them such a trick, after we brought them out so far and made them trot so quick. The carpenter said nothing, but the butter spread too thick. I weep for you, the walrus said. I deeply sympathize. With sobs and tears he sorted out those of the largest size, holding his pocket handkerchief before his streaming eyes. Oysters, said the carpenter, you've had a pleasant run. Shall we begin trotting home again? But answer there came none, and this was scarcely odd because they had eaten every one. Yay! Appreciate that. Yeah, that was fun. All right, let's see how far I can get in 3 minutes on this cube here. Good old 5x5. We're gonna pair our sides here and see how quickly we can do the. But what is your favorite rhyme or poem from Alice in Wonderland? I know there was quite a few songs in Alice in Wonderland, and a lot of them were adapted from the poems he wrote in the original book of Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, one of my favorites is the Jabberwocky. And it was a toss-up between this one and that one. But this one took it because it was quite so goofy, and I think we all need a little goofy sometimes. That's what I say. Nope. But I hope everybody had a beautiful Monday. Let me know what it is that made you smile today, as everybody should have at least one something nice to smile about every single day. That's what I say. It's funny. I realized just recently that my dog gets a little antsy every single time that I stream, and I've always wondered why. And then I realized because she doesn't know that I'm not talking directly to her. So she's trying to be within earshot. And you know what? That's cute. Albeit a little sad. Hey, what's up, Heavy D? I was just thinking about you, and I was just talking about you. Saturday, I actually found a bug trainer card, and I'm gonna zhuzh it up for you with a little bug action and send it off to you, but there wasn't anybody I thought of other than you. And then if y'all want to check the Artist Appreciation channel, I did do a canvas painting for Puck Rocker, who did win the last ghost standing for the subject rights to that canvas. He said Mimikyu, so I drew Mimikyu, Trubbish, and Crobat all hanging out in an alley, and I'm very happy with it. Came out quite nice. Yeah, I thought you might enjoy that. You would do it for us, so absolutely. Let's do this first. I'm gonna do it. I'm crazy, but I'm gonna do it. Okay, now we got another middle. This one. Yucca power. Because we're the Planeteers. You can be one too. Because saving our planet is the thing to do. Power's yours, y'all. Alright. Digging it. I wonder if we can pull a fast one here. One of these. That wouldn't work. I'm silly for thinking it. There it is. What time is it? 13 minutes. 2 more minutes, y'all. We're going to bust out the book of the night, which is John Carter of Mars series. We're going to be reading further into the Chessmen of Mars, following his daughter, Tara, through quite an adventure. Disgusting of that, with some of the spider heads and headless bodies running around. Why'd you guys let me do that? I know. Definitely not cool. Especially because I thought I had it. In the bag. Oh well. Amazing change of pace, honestly. Yeah. Yo, how's the Ghost fam? What's up, Blood Sugar? Good to see you. It was a good weekend. I did my best to just unwind and relax. As often as I don't do that, it's quite nice when I get a chance to do that. Got to paint and work on a lot of art. The one thing I didn't do though was get a bunch of mail packed up that really needs to go out. but I promise it will happen throughout this week so that I can get it out on early next week, which is going to line up perfectly. Plus, it'll give me a chance to finish up a lot of the art. Boom, 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 boom. This is what I messed up last time. And I swear that's what I did last time. But, what ifs, Kevs? Whatever. Hungry Hollow, member for 2 months. Appreciate you, fam. How you doing? It's good to see you, and congratulations last night again, winning that ETB. Off good old JR. Can't wait to hear what you pull. High schooler, first day for Jade, no shot. Watch out. Gonna have to be polishing your Charizard when she starts bringing them boys home. Let them know you're not messing around. Bust out those slabs, let them know. If we become. Kind of one of those, I'm so close now, y'all, I might as well just finish it. I did not make the 15-minute time frame, but I also read a poem while I waited. But it is really, really good to see you, everybody. Gonna borrow a little stuff. Absolutely. Well, just know that she not only has one hell of a dad, but she's got like 1,200 crazy uncles. So just, throwing that out there. Arthur Puck. Wow. Oh, I appreciate that. I thought it was pretty cute. The Trubbish was really an afterthought. I was like, oh, well, they're in an alley. Naturally, if you're walking around in Legends EA, you see Trubbish hanging out in an alley next to the electrical boxes, so why not? Plus, I think that's a favorite of Puck's also. And this should be it. Alright. Good. Now we do that. We bust out the book. Then take a long swig of this strawberry kiwi concoction they decided to bring me. Which isn't bad, but I was expecting mango. Alright, we're going to get into John Carter or the Chessmen of Mars. It's following a couple of, it's following Tara of Helium, John Carter's daughter. And then she's with somebody who tried to court her, and she was like, no, not going to work. And then he ended up actually saving her and actually found her because she was kidnapped by the wind. I know, this got crazy. I do remember the scene from Bad Boys. That's funny. We're 60% of the way through 7 books, y'all. So we're on the downslope now. All we have is the Mastermind of Mars and the Fighting Man of Mars. Those last 2. Hey, Nick. Hope you're doing well. All right. Well, thank you all for coming to Relax and Read with the Pokey Ghost. Got 4 of you showing in here, so really appreciate you. 6 likes. And we're going to get into it. We're going to read 4 chapters tonight, as they're a little bit longer than normal. I should have checked to see how many chapters were in it, but 12. Yeah, so we're going to get to chapter 12 tonight is the goal. But really appreciate you. As I read, I will not be addressing the chat, as I do not want to break the ambiance, so to speak. But yeah, I really hope you enjoy the story, and here we go. We're going to start with chapter 9. Adrift over strange regions. Presently, Gek pushed aside a door that opened from the stairway, and before them Tara saw the moonlight flooding the walled court where the headless rikers lay beside their feeding troughs. She saw the perfect bodies, muscled as the best of her father's fighting men, and the females whose figures would have been envy of many of Helium's most beautiful women. Ah, if she could but endow these with the power to act. Then indeed might the safety of the Panthen be assured, but they were only poor lumps of clay, nor had she the power to quicken them to life. Ever must they lie thus until dominated by the cold, heartless brain of a Kaldane. The girl sighed in pity even as she shuddered in disgust as she picked her way over and among the sprawled creatures toward the flyer. Quickly she and Gek mounted the deck after the latter had cast off the moorings. Tara tested the control, raising and lowering the ship a few feet within the walled space. It responded perfectly. Then she lowered it to the ground again and waited. From the open doorway came the sounds of conflict, now nearing them, now receding. The girl, having witnessed her champion's skill, had little fear of the outcome. Only a single antagonist could face him at a time upon the narrow stairway. He had the advantage of position and of defense and of the defensive. And he was the master of the sword, while they were clumsy burglars by comparison. Their sole advantage was in their numbers, unless they might find a way to come upon him from behind. She paled at the thought. Could she have seen him, she might have been further perturbed, for he took no advantage of many opportunities to win nearer the enclosure. He fought coolly, but with a savage persistence that bore little semblance of purely defensive action. Often he clambered over the body of a fallen foe to leap against the next behind, and once there lay 5 dead Kaldanes behind him. So far he had pushed back his antagonist. They did not know it, these Kaldanes that he had fought, nor did the girl awaiting him upon the flyer. But Gahan of Gathol was engaged in more alluring sport than winning to freedom, for he was avenging the indignities that had been put upon the woman he loved. But presently he realized that he might be jeopardizing her safety and uselessly, and so he struck down another before him and turning leaped quickly up the stairway while the leading Kaldane slipped up the brain-covered floor and stumbled in pursuit. Gahan reached the enclosure 20 paces ahead of them and raced toward the flyer. "Rise," he shouted to the girl. "I will ascend the cable." Slowly the small craft rose from the ground as Gahan leaped the inert bodies of the rykors laying in his path. The first of the pursuers sprang from the tower just as Gahan seized the trailing rope. "Faster!" he shouted to the girl above, "or they will drag us down!" But the ship seemed scarcely to move, though in reality she was rising as rapidly as might have been expected of one-man flyer carrying a load of 3. Gahan swung free above the top of the wall, but the end of the rope still dragged the ground as the Kaldanes reached it. They were pouring in steady stream from the tower into the enclosure. The leader seized the rope. "Quick!" he cried. "Lay hold and we will drag them down." It needed but the weight of a few to accomplish his design. The ship was stopped in its flight, and then, to the horror of the girl, she felt it being dragged steadily downward. Gahan, too, realized the dangers and the necessity for instant action. Clinging to the rope with his left hand, he had wound a leg around it, leaving his right hand free for his longsword, which he had not sheathed. A downward cut clove the soft head of the Kaldane, and another severed the taut rope beneath the Panthen's feet. The girl heard a sudden renewal of the shrill whistling of her foes, and at the same time she realized that the craft was rising again. Slowly it drifted upward, out of the reach of the enemy, and a moment later she saw the figure of Taurin clamber over the side. For the first time in many weeks her heart was filled with joy of thanksgiving, but her first thought was of another. "You are not wounded?" she asked. "No, Tara of Helium," he replied. "They were scarce worth the effort of my blade, and never were they a menace to me because of their swords." "They should have slain you easily," said Ghek. "So great and highly developed is the power of reason among us that they should have known before you struck just where, logically, you must seek to strike, so they should have been able to parry your every thrust and easily find an opening to your heart." "But they did not, Ghek," Gahan reminded him. "Their theory of development is wrong." for it does not tend toward a perfectly balanced whole. You have developed the brain and neglected the body. You can never do with the hands of another what you can do with your own hands. Mine are trained to the sword. Every muscle responds instantly and accurately and almost mechanically to the need of the instant. I am scarcely objectively aware that I think when I fight, so quickly does my point take advantage of every opening, or spring to my defense if I am threatened, that it is almost as though the cold steel had eyes and brains. You, with your Kaldane brain and your Rykor body, never could hope to achieve the same degree of perfection, those things that I can achieve. Development of the brain should not be the sum total of human endeavor. The richest and happiest people will be those who attain closest to well-balanced perfection of both mind and body. And even these must always be of short imperfection. In absolute and general perfection lies stifling monotony and death. Nature must have contrasts. She must have shadows as well as the highlights. Sorrow with happiness, both wrong and right, and sin as well as virtue. Always have I been taught always have I been taught differently, replied Ghek. But since I have known this woman and you of another race, I have come to believe that there may be other standards fully as high and desirable as those of the Chaldeans. At least I have the at least I have had a glimpse of the thing you call happiness, and I realize that it may be good even though I have no means of expressing it. I cannot laugh nor smile, and yet within me is a sense of contentment when this woman sings, a sense that seems to open before me a wondrous vistas of beauty and unguessed pleasure far transcended the cold joys of a perfectly functioning brain. I would that I had been I would that I had been born of thy race. Caught by a gentle current of air, the flyer was drifting slowly toward the northeast across the valley of Bantoon. Below them lay the cultivated fields, and one after another they passed over the strange towers of Mowak and Nolak and the other kings of the swarms, and inhabited this weird and terrible land. Within each enclosure surrounding the towers groveled the Rykors, repellent, headless things, beautiful yet hideous. A lesson, those, remarked Gahan, indicating the Rykors and the enclosures above, which they were drifting at the time, to that fortunately small minority of our race which worships the flesh and makes a god of appetite. You know them, Tara of Helium. They can tell you exactly what they had at the midday meal 2 weeks ago, and how the loin of the throat should be prepared. The loin of the throat should be prepared, and what drink should be served with the rump of the zatitter. Tara of Helium laughed. But not one of them could tell you the names of the man whose painting took the Jetix Award in the Temple of Beauty this year, she said. Like the Rykors, their development has not yet been balanced. Fortunate indeed are those in which there is combined a little good and a little bad, a little knowledge of many things outside their own callings, a capacity for love and a capacity for hate. For such as these can look with tolerance upon all, unbiased by the egotism of him whose head is so heavy on one side that all his brains run to that point. As Gahan ceased speaking, Ghek made a little noise in his throat, as one does who would attract attention. You speak as one who has thought much upon many subjects. Is it, then, possible that you of the red race have pleasure in thought? Do you know aught of the joys of introspection? Do reason and logic form any part of your lives? Most assuredly, replied Gahan, but not in the extent of occupying all our time. At least not objectively. You, Ghek, are an example of the egotism in which I spoke. Because you and your kind devote your lives to the worship of mind, you believe that no other created beings think. And possibly we do not in the sense that you do, who think only of yourselves and your great brains. We think of many things that concern the welfare of the world. Had it not been for the red men of Barsoom, even the Chaldaeans had perished from the planet. For while you may live without the air, the things upon which you depend for existence cannot. And there had been no air in sufficient quantities upon Barsoom these many ages, and not a red man planned and built, and had not a red man planned and built the great atmosphere plant which gave new life to a dying world. What have all the brains of the Chaldeans that have ever lived done to compare with the single idea of the single red man? Ghek was stumped. Being a Chaldean, he knew that brain spelled the sum total of universal achievement. but it had never occurred to him that they should be put to use in practical or profitable ways. He turned away and looked down upon the valley of his ancestors, across which he was slowly drifting into what unknown world? He should be a veritable god among the underlings, he knew, but somehow a doubt assailed him. It was evident that these two from that other world were ready to question his preeminence, even though his great egotism was filtering a suspicion that they patronized him, perhaps even pitied him. Then he began to wonder what was to become of him. No longer would he have many Rykors to do his bidding, only this single one, and when it died there could not be another. When it tired, Gek must lie almost helpless while it rested. He wished that he had never seen this red woman. She had brought him only discontent and dishonor, now exile. Presently Tara of Helium commenced to hum a tune, and Gek the Chaldean was content. Gently they drifted beneath the hurtling moons above the mad shadow of the Martian night. The roaring of the bants came in diminishing volume to their ears as the craft passed on beyond the boundaries of Bantoom, leaving behind the terrors of that unhappy land. But to what were they being borne? The girl looked at the man sitting cross-legged upon the deck of the tiny flyer, gazing off into the night ahead, apparently absorbed in thought. "Where are we?" she asked. "Toward what are we drifting?" Turin shrugged his broad shoulders. "The stars tell me that we are drifting toward the northeast," he replied. "But where we are, or what lies in our path, I cannot even guess. A week since I could have sworn that I knew what lay beyond each succeeding ridge that I approached, but now I admit in all humility that I have no conception of what lies a mile in any direction. Tara of Helium, I am lost, and that is all I can tell you." He was smiling, and the girl smiled back at him. There was a slightly puzzled expression on her face. There was something tantalizingly familiar about the smile of his. She had met many a panthan. They came and went, following a fighting of the world, but she could not place this one. "From what country are you, Turin?" she asked suddenly. "Know you not, Tara of Helium?" he countered, "that a panthan has no country? Today he fights beneath the banner of one master, tomorrow beneath that of another." "But you must own allegiance to some country when you are not fighting," she insisted. "What banner, then, owns you now?" He rose and stood before her, then bowing low, "And I am acceptable," he said. "I serve beneath the banner of the daughter of the warlord now and forever." She reached forth and touched his arm with a slim brown hand. "Your services are accepted," she said, "and if ever we reach Helium, I promise that your reward shall be all that your heart could desire." "I shall serve faithfully, hoping for that reward," he said. But Tara of Helium did not guess what was in his mind, thinking rather that he was a mercenary. For how could the proud daughter of the warlord guess that a simple panthan aspired to her heart and her hand? The dawn found them moving rapidly over an unfamiliar landscape. The wind had increased during the night and had borne them far from Bantoom. The country below them was rough and inhospitable. No water was visible, and the surface of the ground was cut by deep gorges, while nowhere was any but the most meager vegetation discernible. They saw no life of any nature, nor was there any indication that the country would support life. For 2 days they drifted over this horrid wasteland. They were without food or water and suffered accordingly. Gek had temporarily abandoned his Rykor after enlisting Turin's assistance in lashing it safely to the deck. The less he used it, the less would its vitality be spent. Already it was showing the effects of provision. Gek crawled about the vessel like a giant spider, over the side, down beneath the keel, and up over the opposite rail. He seemed equally at home one place as another. For his companions, however, the quarters were cramped, for the deck of a one-man flyer is not intended for three. Turin sought always ahead for signs of water. Water they must have, or that water-giving plant which makes life possible upon many of the seemingly arid areas of Mars. But there was neither the one nor the other for these 2 days, and now the third night was upon them. The girl did not complain, but Turin knew that she must be suffering, and his heart was heavy within him. Gek suffered least of all, and he explained to them that his kind, could exist for long periods without food or water. Turin almost cursed at him when he saw the form of Tara of Helium slowly wasting away before his eyes, while this hideous Chaldean seemed as full of vitality as ever. "There are circumstances," remarked Gek, "under which a gross material body is less desirable than a highly developed brain. Turin looked at him but said nothing. Tara of Helium smiled faintly. One cannot blame him, she said. We are not a bit boastful in the pride of our superiority. When our stomachs are filled, she added. Perhaps there is something to be said for their system, Turin admitted. If we could but lay aside our stomachs when they cried for food and water, I have no doubt that we should do so. I should never miss mine now, assented Tara. It is mighty poor company. A new day had dawned, revealing a less desolate country and renewing again the hope that had been low within them. Suddenly, Turin leaned forward, pointing ahead. Look, Tara of Helium, he cried. A city! I am as I am Turin the Panthin, a city! Far in the distance, the domes and walls and slender towers of the city shone in the rising sun. Quickly the man seized the control of the ship and dropped rapidly behind the low range of intervening hills, for well Turin knew that they must not be seen until they could discover whether friend or foe inhabited the strange city. Chances were that they were far from the abode of friends, and so must the Panthan move with the utmost caution. But there was a city, and where a city was water, even though it was a deserted city, of food if it were inhabited. To the red man, of food and water, even in the citadel of an enemy, meant food and drink for Tara of Helium. But he would accept it from friends, or he would take it from enemies. Just so long as it was there, he would have it. And there was shown the egotism of the fighting man, though Turin did not see it, nor Tara, who came from a long line of fighting men. But Gek might have smiled, had he known how. Turin permitted the flyer to drift closer behind the screening hills, and then, when he could advance no further without fear of discovery, he dropped the craft gently to the ground in a little ravine, and leaping out over the side, made her fast to a stout tree. For several moments they discussed their plans, whether it would be best to wait where they were until darkness hid their movements and then approach the city in search of food and water, or approach it now, taking advantage of what cover they could until they could glean something of the nature of its inhabitants. It was Turin's plan, which finally prevailed. They would approach as close as safety dictated in the hope of finding water outside the city, food too, perhaps. If they did not, they could at least reconnoiter the ground by daylight, and then, when the night came, Turin could quickly come close to the city and, in comparative safety, prosecute his search for food and drink. Following the ravine upward, they finally topped the summit of the ridge, from which they had an excellent view of that part of the city which lay nearest them. Though themselves hidden by the brush behind which they crouched, Gecht had resumed his Rykor, which had suffered less than either Tara or Turin, though their enforced fast. Through their enforced fast. Got it. The first glance in the city, now much closer than when they had first discovered it, revealed the fact that it was inhabited. Banners and pennons broke from many a staff. People were moving about the gate before them. The high white walls were paced by sentinels at far intervals. Upon the roofs of higher buildings, the women could be seen airing the sleeping silks and furs. Turin watched it all in silence for some time. I do not know them, he said at last. I cannot guess what city this may be. But it is an ancient city. Its people have no flyers and no firearms. It must be old indeed. How do you know they do not have these things? Asked the girl. There are no landing stages upon the roofs. Not one that I can be seen from here. While we're looking similarly at Helium, we would see hundreds. And they have no firearms because their defenses are all built in to withstand the attack of spear and arrow with spear and arrow. They are of an ancient people. If they are an ancient, perhaps they are friendly, suggests the girl. Did we not learn as children in the history of our planet that it is once peopled by a friendly, peace-loving race? But I fear they are not as ancient as that, replied Turin, laughing. It has been long ages since the men of Barsoom loved peace. My father loves peace, returned the girl. And yet he is always at war, said the man. She laughed, but he says he likes peace. We all like peace, he rejoined. Peace with honor, but our neighbors will not let us have it, and so we must fight. And to fight well, men must like to fight. And to fight well, men must like to fight, she added. And to like to fight, they must know how to fight, he said, for no man likes to do the thing he does not know how to do well, or that some other men can do better than he. And so always there will be wars and men will fight, he concluded, for always the men with hot blood in their veins will patrice the art of war. That's practice. Practice the art of war. We have settled a great question, said the girl, smiling, but our stomachs are still empty. Your Panthen is neglecting his duty, replied Turin, and how can he with the great reward always before his eyes? She did not guess in what literal sense he spoke. I go forthwith, he continued, to wrest food and drink from the ancients. No, she cried, laying a hand upon his arm, not yet. They would slay you or make you a prisoner. You are a brave Panthen and a mighty one, but you cannot overcome a city single-handedly. She smiled up into his face, and her hand still lay upon his arm. He felt the thrill of hot blood coursing through his veins. He could have seized her in his arms and crushed her to him. There was only Ghek the Chaldean there, but there was something stronger within him that restrained his hand. Who may defy it? That inherent chivalry that renders certain men with the natural protectors of women. From their vantage point, they saw a body of armed warriors ride forth from the gate. Winding along a well-beaten road, passed from sight about the foot of the hill from which they watched. The men were red, like themselves, and they rode the small saddle thoats of the red race. Their trappings were barbaric and magnificent, and in the headdress were many feathers, as had been the custom of the ancients. They were armed with swords and long spears, and they rode almost naked, their bodies being painted in ochre and blue and white. There were perhaps a score of them in a party, and as they galloped away on their tireless mounts, they presented a picture at once savage and beautiful. They have the appearance of splendid warriors, said Turin. I have a great mind to walk boldly into their city and seek service. Tara shook her head. Wait, she admonished. What would I do without you? And if you were captured, how could you collect your reward? I should escape, he said. At any rate, I shall try it. And he started to rise. You shall not, said the girl, her tone all authority. The man looked at her quickly, questioningly. You have entered my service, she said, a trifle haughtily. You have entered my service for hire, and you shall do as I bid. Turin sunk down beside her again, with a half-smile upon his lips. It is yours to command, princess, he said. The day passed. Ghek, tiring of the sunlight, had deserted his rykor and crawled down a hole he had discovered close by. Tara and Turin reclined beneath the scant shade of a small tree. They watched the people coming and going through the gate. The party of horsemen did not return. A small herd of zitiders was driven into the city during the day, and once a caravan of bright, broad-wheeled carts, drawn by these huge animals, wound out into the distant horizon and came down to the city. It, too, passed from their sight within the gateway. Then darkness came, and Tara of Helium bid her Panthen search for food and drink, but she cautioned him against attempting to enter the city. Before he left her, he bent and kissed her hand as a warrior may kiss the hand of his queen. What's up, Ryan Tran? Good to see you. Hope you are doing well. Philosophy, always good to see you, brother. Time to doodle and listen. Love it. Love it, love it. What are you doodling? Well, that was pretty intense. They found another city, but it is very good advice to always make sure we find if they are friend or foe before we just go walking in. Still not mango, but it's pretty good. Oh no, I just realized Pokey Girl Jessie is in here. That's odd. Hope she's alright. And we're going to get into chapter 10, which is Entrapped. Of course it's Entrapped. Which means they're probably going to be captured. So, alright. got all bunched up. Turin, the Panthan, approached the strange city under the cover of darkness. He entertained little hope of finding either food or water outside the wall, but he would try then. If he failed, he would attempt to make his way into the city, for Tara of Helium must have sustenance and have it soon. He saw that the walls were poorly sentineled, but they were sufficiently high to render any attempt to scale them foredoomed to failure. Taking advantage of the underbrush and trees, Turin managed to reach the base of the wall without detection. Silently, he moved north past the gate, which was closed by a massive gate which effectively barred even the slightest glimpse into the city beyond. It was Turin's hope to find upon the north side of the city, away from the hills, a level plain where grew the crops of the inhabitants, and here too water from their irrigation systems. But though he traveled far along the seemingly interminable wall, he found no fields nor any water. He searched also for some means of ingress into the city, yet here too failure was the only reward. And now, as he went, keen eyes watched him from above, and a silent stalker kept pace with him for a time upon the summit of the wall. But presently the shadower descended to the pavement within, the hurrying swiftly raced ahead of the stranger without. He came presently to a small gate, beside which was a low building, and before the doorway of the building a warrior standing guard. He spoke a few quick words to the warrior, and then entered the building, only to return almost immediately to the street, followed by full 40 warriors, cautiously opening the gate. The fellow peered carefully along the wall upon the outside of the direction from which he had come. Evidently satisfied, he issued a few words of instruction to those behind him, whereupon half the warriors returned to the interior of the building, while the other half followed the man stealthily through the gateway, where they crouched low among the shrubbery in a half circle just north of the gateway which they had left open. Here they lay waited in utter silence. Nor had they come long to wait before Turin the Panthan came cautiously over the base of the wall to the very gate he came, and when he found it, and that it was open, he paused for a moment, listening. Then he approached and looked within. Assured that there was none within sight to apprehend him, he stepped through the gateway into the city. He found himself in a narrow street that paralleled the wall. Upon the opposite side rose buildings of an architecture unknown to him, yet strangely beautiful. While the buildings were packed closely together, there seemed to be no two alike, and their fronts were of all shapes and heights and of many hues. The skyline was broken by spire and dome and minaret, and tall, slender towers, while the walls supported many a balcony, and in the soft light of Cluros, the farther moon, now low in the west, he saw, to his surprise and consternation, the figures of people upon the balconies directly opposite him were 2 women and a man. They sat leaning upon the rails of the balcony, looking apparently directly at him, but if they saw him they gave no sign. Turin hesitated for a moment in the face of almost certain discovery, and then, assured that they must take him for one of their own people, he moved boldly into the avenue, having no idea of the direction in which he might best hope to find what he sought, and not wishing to arouse suspicion by further hesitation. He turned to the left and stepped briskly along the pavement, with the intention of placing himself as quickly as possible beyond the observation of those nocturnal watchers. He knew that the night must be far spent, and so he could not but wonder why people would sit upon their balconies when they should have been asleep among their silks and furs. At first he had thought them the late guests of some convivial host, but the windows behind them were shrouded in darkness, and utter quiet prevailed, quite upsetting such a theory. And as he proceeded, he passed many other groups sitting silently upon their balconies. They paid no attention to him, seeming not even to note his passing. Some leaned with a single elbow on the rail, their chins resting on their palms, while others leaned upon both arms across the balcony, looking down into the street, while several that he saw held musical instruments in their hands, but their fingers moved not upon the strings. And then Turin came to a point where the avenue turned to the right, to skirt a building that jutted from the inside of the city wall. And as he rounded the corner, he came full upon 2 warriors standing upon either side of the entrance to a building upon his right. It was impossible for them not to be aware of his presence, yet neither moved, nor gave any other evidence that they had seen him. He stood there waiting, his hand upon the hilt of his longsword, but they neither challenged nor halted him. Could it be that these two also thought him one of their own kind? Indeed, upon no other grounds could this explanation be there in action. As Turin had passed through the gateway into the city and taken his unhindered way along the avenue, 20 warriors had entered the city and closed the gate behind them, and then one had taken to the wall and followed along its summit in the rear of Turin, and another had followed him along the avenue, while a third had crossed the street and entered one of the buildings upon the opposite side. The balance of them, with the exception of the single sentinel behind the gate, had re-entered the building from which they had been summoned. They were well built, strapping painted fellows, their naked figures covered now by gorgeous robes against the chill of the night. As they spoke of the stranger, they laughed at the ease with which they had tricked him, and were still laughing as they threw themselves upon their sleeping silks and furs to resume their broken slumber. It was evident that they constituted a guard detail for the gate behind which they slept, and it was equally evident that the gates were guarded and the city watched much more carefully than Turin had believed. Chagrined indeed had been the Jet of Gathol, and he dreamed that he was being so neatly tricked. As Turin proceeded along the avenue, he passed other sentries beside other doors, and now he gave them small heed, since they neither challenged nor otherwise outwardly noted his passing. But while at nearly every turn of the erratic avenue he passed one or more of these silent sentinels, he could not guess that he had passed one of them many times, and that his every move was watched by silent, clever stalkers. Scarce had he passed a certain one of these rigid guardmen before the fellow awoke to sudden life, bounded across the avenue, entered a narrow opening in the outer wall, where he swiftly followed a corridor built within the wall itself, until presently he emerged a little distance ahead of Turin, where he assumed the stiff and silent attitude of the soldier upon guard. Nor did Turin know that a second followed in the shadows of the building behind him, nor of the third who hastened ahead of him upon some urgent mission. And so the Panthan moved through the silent streets of the strange city in search of food and drink for the woman he loved. Men and women looked down upon him from shadowy balconies, but spoke not, and sentinels saw him pass and did not challenge. Presently, from along the avenue before him came a familiar sound of clanking accoutrements, the herald of marching warriors, and almost simultaneously he saw upon his right an open doorway dimly lit from within. It was the only available place where he might seek to hide from the approaching company. And while he had passed several centuries unquestioned, he could scarce hope to escape scrutiny and questioning from a patrol, as he naturally assumed this body of men to be. Inside the doorway he discovered a passage turning abruptly to the right and almost immediately thereafter to the left. There was none in sight within, so he stepped incautiously around the second turn, the more effectual to be hidden from the street. Before him stretched a long corridor, dimly lighted like an entrance. Waiting there, he heard the party approaching the building. He heard someone at the entrance to his hiding place, and then he heard the door past which he had come slam to. He laid his hand upon his sword, expecting momentarily to hear footsteps approaching along the corridor, but none came. He approached the turn and looked around it. The corridor was empty to the closed door. Whoever had closed it had remained on the outside. Turin waited, listening. He heard no sound. Then he advanced to the door and placed an ear against it. All was silent in the streets beyond. A sudden draught must have closed the door. Perhaps it was the duty of the patrol to see to such things. It was immaterial. They had evidently passed on, and now he would return to the streets and continue upon his way. Somewhere there would be a public fountain where he could obtain water, and the chance of food lay in the strings of dried vegetables and meat which hung before the doorways of nearly every Barsoomian home in the poorer classes that he had ever seen. It was this district that he was seeking, and it was for this reason his search had led him away from the main gate of the city, which he knew would not be located in the poor district. He attempted to open the door, only to find that it resisted his every effort. It was locked upon the outside. Here indeed was a sorry counteremps. Turin, the Panthan, scratched his head. "Fortune frowns upon me," he muttered. But beyond the door, fate, in the form of a painted warrior, stood smiling. Neatly had he tricked the unwary stranger. The lighted doorway, the marching patrol, these had been planned and timed to a necessity by a third warrior, by the third warrior who had sped ahead of Turin along the other avenue. And the stranger had done precisely what the fellow had thought he would do. No wonder, then, that he smiled. This exit barred to him, Turin turned back into the corridor. He followed it cautiously and silently, and occasionally there was a door on one side or the other. These he tried, only to find they each securely locked. The corridor wound more erratically the farther he advanced. A locked door barred his way at its end, but a door upon his right opened, and he stepped into a dimly lit chamber, about the walls of which were three other doors, each of which he had tried in turn. Two were locked. The other opened on a runway leading downward. It was spiral, and he could see no further than the first turn. A door in the corridor he had quitted opened after he had passed, and the third warrior stepped out and followed after him. A faint smile still lingered upon the fellow's grim lips. Turin drew his short sword and cautiously descended. At the bottom was a short corridor with a closed door. At the end, he approached the single heavy panel and listened. No sound came to him from beyond the mysterious portal. Gently he tried the door, which swung easily towards him at his touch. Before him was a low, sealed chamber with a dirt floor. Set in the walls were several other doors, which were all closed. As Turin stepped cautiously within, the third warrior descended the spiral runway behind him. The Panthan crossed the room quickly and tried a door. It was locked. He heard a muffled click behind him and turned about with ready sword. He was alone, but the door through which he had entered was closed. It was the click of the lock that he had heard. With a bound he crossed the room to attempt to open it, but to no avail. No longer did he seek silence, for he knew now that the thing had gone beyond the sphere of chance. He threw his weight against the wooden panel, but the thick steel of which it was constructed would have withstood a battering ram. From beyond came a low laugh. Rapidly Turin examined each of the other doors. They were all locked. A glance about the chamber revealed a wooden table and a bench set into the wall, were several heavy rings to which rusty chains were attached, all too significant of the purpose to which this room was dedicated. In the dirt floor near the wall were two or three holes resembling the mouths of burrows, doubtless the inhabitants of the giant Martian rat. He had observed this much when suddenly the dim light was extinguished, leaving him in darkness, utter and complete. Turin, groping about, sought the table and the bench. Placing the latter against the wall, he drew the table in front of him and sat down upon the bench, his long sword gripped in readiness before him. At least they should fight before they took him. For some time he sat there, waiting for he knew not what. No sound penetrated to his subterranean dungeon. He slowly revolved in his mind the incidents of the evening, the open, unguarded gate, the lighted doorway, the only one he had thus seen open and lighted along the avenue he had followed. The advance of the warriors at precisely the moment that he could find no other avenues of escape or concealment. The corridors and chambers that led past many locked doors to this underground prison, leaving no other path for him to pursue. By my first ancestor, he swore. But it was simple, and I a simpleton. They tricked me neatly and have taken me without exposing themselves to a scratch, but for what purpose? He wished that he might answer it. He wished that he might answer that question, and then his thoughts turned to the girl waiting there on the hill behind the city for him. And he would never come. He knew the ways of more savage peoples of Barsoom. No, he would never come now. He had disobeyed her. He smiled at the sweet recollection of those words of command that had fallen from her dear lips. He had disobeyed her, and now he had lost the reward. But what of her? What now would be her fate? Starving before a hostile city with only an inhuman Kaldane for company. Another thought, a horrid thought, obtruded itself upon him. She had told him of the hideous sights she had witnessed in the burrows of the Kaldanes, and he knew that they ate human flesh. Gek was starving. Should he eat his Rykor, he would be helpless, but there was sustenance there for them both, for the Rykor and the Kaldane. Turin cursed himself for a fool. Why had he left her? Far better to have remained and died with her. Ready always to protect her than have left her to the mercy of the hideous Bantumian. Now Turin detected a heavy odor in the air. It oppressed him with a feeling of drowsiness. He would have risen to fight off the creeping lethargy, but his legs seemed so weak. so that he sank again to the bench. Presently his sword slipped from his fingers, and he sprawled forward upon the table, his head resting upon his arms. Tara of Helium, as the night wore on, Turin did not return, became more and more uneasy, and when dawn broke with no sign of him, she guessed that he had failed. Something more than her unhappy predicament brought a feeling of sorrow in her heart, of sorrow and loneliness. She realized now how she had come to depend upon this panthan, not only for protection, but for companionship as well. She missed him, and in missing him realized suddenly that he had meant more to her than a mere hired warrior. It was as though a friend had been taken from her, an old and valued friend. She rose from her place of concealment that she might have a better view of the city. Eudor, dwarf of the Eighth, Utan of Otar, Jeddak of Monitor, rode back in the early dawn toward Monitor from the brief excursion of the neighboring village. As he was rounding the hills of the south of the city, his keen eyes were attracted by a slight movement among the shrubbery close to the summit of the nearest hill. He halted his vicious mount and watched more closely. He saw a figure rising. He saw a figure rise, facing away from him, and peered down toward Minotaur, behind the hill. "Come," he signaled to his followers, and with a word to his throat, turned the beast at a rapid gallop up the hillside. In his wake swept his 20 savage warriors and padded feet of their mounts soundless upon the soft turf. It was a rattle of sidearms and harnesses that brought Tara of Helium suddenly about, facing them. She saw a score of warriors with crouched lances bearing down upon her. She glanced at Gek. What would the Spider-Man do in this emergency? She saw him crawl into his Rykor and attach himself. Then he rose, the beautiful body once again animated and alert. She thought that the creature was preparing for flight. Well, it made little difference to her. Against such as were streaming up the hill towards them, a single mediocre swordsman such as Gek was worse than no defense at all. "Hurry, Gek," she admonished. "Back into the hills. You may find their hiding place." But the creature only stepped between her and the oncoming riders, drawing his longsword. "It is useless, Gek," she said, when she saw that he intended to defend her. "What can a single sword accomplish against such odds?" "I can but die once," replied the Chaldean. "You and your panthan saved me from Lud, and I but do what your panthan would do if he were here to protect you." "It is brave, but it is useless," she replied. "Sheathe your sword. They may not intend to harm us." Gek let the point of his weapon drop to the ground, but he did not sheathe it, and thus the two stood waiting as Eudor, the dwarf, stopped his throat before them while his 20 warriors formed a rough circle about. For a long minute Eudor sat on his mount in silence, looking searchingly first at Tara of Helium and then at her hideous companion. "What manner of creature are you?" he asked presently, "and what do you before the gates of Monitor?" "We are from far countries," replied the girl, "and we are lost and starving. We ask only food and rest and the privilege to go our way seeking our own homes." Eudor smiled a grim smile. "Minotaur and the hills which guard it alone know the age of Minotaur," he said. "Yet in all ages that have rolled by since Minotaur first was, there be no record of the annals of Minotaur of the stranger departing from Minotaur." "But I am a princess," cried the girl haughtily, "and my country is not at war with yours. You must give me and my companions aid and assist us to return to our own land. This is the law of Barsoom." "Manotor knows only the laws of Manotor," replied Eudor. "But come, you shall go with us to the city, where you, being beautiful, need not know fear. I myself will protect you, if Otar so decrees. And as of your companion, but hold, you said companions. There are others of your party, then?" "You see what you see," replied Tara haughtily. "Be that as it may," said Eudor, "if there be more, they shall not escape Manotor. But, as I was saying, if your companion fights well, he too may live, for Otar is just, and just are the laws of Manotor. Come." Gek demurred. "It is useless," said the girl, seeing that he would have stood his ground and fought them. "Let us go with them. Why pit your puny blade against their mighty ones when there should lie in your great brain the means to outwit them? She spoke in a low whisper rapidly. You are right, Tara of Helium, he replied and sheathed his sword. And so they moved down the hillside toward the gates of Manator, Tara, Princess of Helium, and Gek, the Kaldane of Bantu. And surrounding them rode the savage painted warriors of Udor, Dwar of the 8th Utan of Otar, Jeddak of Manator. Boom. That is the end of chapter 10. Well, they went about that 2 different ways. Made it! Excellent. Checked in too early, then put my phone down and got distracted with something else and missed it. Ah, no worries at all. Laura Lovejoy, how are you doing tonight? I hope you are doing well. You got your mail. Excellent. I'm glad it arrived. That took a month of Sundays, but I'm glad it finally got there. And yes, welcome, welcome. It is good to see you all. Good. I'm glad you're all right. Oh, well, thank you. Yes, these were in the package that JR had sent for me. Yep, very talented artists. Although I never did ask who did them. Did you do these, JR, if you're still hanging around? Were these Jackson Jade? Who painted these? That is something that I did mean to ask. I just kind of assumed. But I want to give credit where credit is due. Let's see. Yep, about an hour in, 2 more chapters. Should put us at about that 2-hour mark and should wrap us up quite nicely. I'm very curious to know, and I don't know why every race they meet in these stories just start off as like total buttheads, but I guess that is the way of Edgar Rice Burroughs. The Choice of Tara, Chapter 11. Man, let me tell you, some of these long, just no break paragraphs are just get into the zone. So I hope you guys are enjoying following the story, and let's see how they get out of it, because we need to hear the choice of Tara. The dazzling sunlight of Barsoom clothed Manatar in an aureole of splendor, as the girl and her captors rode into the city through the gates of enemies. Here the walls were some 50 feet thick, and the sides of the passageway within the gate were covered with parallel shelves of masonry from top to bottom. Within these shelves, or long horizontal niches, stood row upon row of small figures, appearing like tiny, grotesque statuettes of men, their long black hair falling below their feet and sometimes trailing to the shelf beneath. The figures were scarce a foot in height, and but for their diminutive proportions might have been the mummified bodies of once living men. The girl noticed that the girl noticed that as they passed, the warriors saluted the figures with their spears, after the manner of the Barsumian fighting men, and extending the military courtesy, and then they rode on into the avenue beyond, which ran wide and stately through the city toward the east. On either side were great buildings, wondrously wrought. Paintings of the great beauty of antiquity covered many of the walls, their colors softened and blended by the sun of ages. Upon the pavement, the life of the newly awakened city was already afoot. Women in brilliant trappings, befeathered warriors, their bodies daubed with paint, artisan, armed, but less gaily, com- but less gaily caparisoned, took their various ways upon the duties of the day. A giant Zatitter, magnificent in rich harness, rumbled its broad-wheeled cart along the stone pavement toward the gate of enemies. Life and color and beauty wrought together a picture that filled the eyes of Tara of Helium with wonder and with admiration, for here was the scene out of the dead past of dying Mars. Such had been the cities of the founders of her race before Thraxias' mightiest devotions had disappeared from the face of the world. And from balconies on either side, men and women looked down in silence upon the scene below. The people in the street looked at the two prisoners, especially at the hideous Gek, and called out in question or command to their guard. But the watchers upon the balcony spoke not, nor did one so much as turn ahead to note their passing. There were many balconies on each building, and not one that did hold its silent party of richly trapped men and women, with here and there a child or two, but even the children maintained the uniform silence and immobility of their elders. As they approached the center of the city, the girl saw that even the roofs bore companies of these idle watchers, harnessed and bejeweled as for some galleous day, glad day of gallady of laughter and music, but no laughter broke from those silent lips, nor any music from the strings of the instruments that many of them held in jeweled fingers. And now the avenue widened into the immense square, at the far end of which rose a stately edifice, gleaming white and virgin marble along the gaily painted buildings surrounding it, and its scarlet sward, and gaily flowering green foliaged shrubbery. Towards this Eudor led his prisoners and their guard to the great arched entrance, before which a line of 50 mounted warriors barred the way. When the commander of the guard recognized Eudor, the guardsmen fell back on either side, leaving a broad avenue through which the party passed. Directly inside the entrance were inclined runways leaning upward on either side. Eudor turned to the left and led them upward to the second floor and down a long corridor. Here they passed other mounted men, and in chambers upon either side they saw more. Occasionally there was another runway leading up or down. A warrior, his steed at full gallop, dashed into the sight from one of these and raced swiftly past them upon some errand. Nowhere as yet has Terror of Helium seen a man afoot in this great building, but when at a turn Eudor led them to the third floor, she caught glimpses of chambers in which many rideless thoats were penned, and others adjoined where dismounted warriors lolled at ease or played games of skill or chance, and many there were who played at Jatan. And then the party passed into the long, wide hall of the state, as magnificently any apartment had ever as magnificent an apartment as even a princess of mighty Helium ever had seen. The length of the room ran an arched ceiling ablaze with countless radium bulbs. The mighty spans extended from wall to wall, leaving the vast floor unbroken by a single column. The arches were of white marble, apparently quartered in single huge blocks from which each arch was cut complete. Between the arches, the ceiling was set solid about the radium bulbs with precious stones whose scintillant fire and color and beauty filled the whole apartment. The stones were carried down the walls in an irregular fringe for a few feet, where they appeared to hang like a beautiful and gorgeous drapery against the white marble of the wall. The marble ended some 6 or 7 feet from the floor. The walls from that point down began being wainscoted in solid gold. The floor itself was of marble, richly inlaid with gold. In that single room was a vast treasure equal to the wealth of many a large city. But what riveted the girl's attention even more than the fabulous treasure of decorations were the files of gorgeously harnessed warriors who sat their thoats in grim silence and immobility on either side of the central aisle, rank after rank of them to the farther wall. And as the party passed between them, she could not note so much as a flicker of an eyelid or the twitching of a thoat's ear. "The Hall of Chiefs," whispered one of her guard, evidently noting her interest. There was a note of pride in the fellow's voice, and something of hushed awe. Then they passed through the great doorway into the chamber beyond, a large square room in which a dozen mounted warriors lolled in their saddles. As Eudor and his party entered the room, the warriors came quickly erect in their saddles and formed a line before another door upon the opposite side of the wall. The padwar, commanding them saluted Eudor, who, with his party, had halted facing the guard. Send one to Otar, announcing that Eudor brings 2 prisoners worthy of observation of the great Jeddak, said Eudor. One because of her extreme beauty, the other because of his extreme ugliness. Otar sits in council with lesser chiefs, replied the lieutenant. But the words of Eudor, the dwarf, shall be carried to him. And he turned and gave instructions to one who sat his thoat behind him. What manner of creature is the male? He asked of Eudor. It cannot be that both are one race. They were together in the hills south of the city, explained Eudor, and they say that they are lost and starving. The woman is beautiful, said the Padwar. She will not long go begging in the city of Manator. And then they spoke of other matters, of the doings of the palace, of the expedition of Eudor, until the messenger returned to say that Otar bade them to bring the prisoners to him. They passed then through a massive doorway, which, when opened, revealed the great council chamber of Otar, Jeddak of Manator, beyond. A central aisle led from the doorway the full length of the great hall, terminating at the steps of the marble dais upon which a man sat in a great throne chair. Upon either side of the aisle were ranged rows of highly carved desks of chairs of keel, a hard wood of great beauty. Only a few of the desks were occupied, those in the front row just below the rostrum. At the entrance Eudor dismounted, with 4 of his followers who formed a guard about the 2 prisoners, who were then conducted toward the foot of the throne, following a few paces behind Eudor, following a few paces behind Eudor. As they halted at the foot of the marble steps, the proud gaze of Tara of Helium rested upon the enthroned figure of the man above her. He sat erect, without stiffness, a commanding presence, trapped in the barbaric splendor of that Barsoomian chieftain loves. He was a large man, the perfection of whose handsome face was marred only by the hauteur of his cold eyes and the suggestion of cruelty imparted by 2 thin lips. He needed no second glance to assure the least observing that here indeed was the ruler of men. A fighting Jeddak whose people might worship but not love, and for whose slightest favor warriors would vie with one another to go forth and die. This was Otar, Jeddak of Manator, and as Tara of Helium saw him for the first time, she could not but acknowledge a certain admiration for his savage chieftain, who so virally personified the ancient virtues of the god of war. Eudor and the Jeddak interchanged a simple greeting of Barsoom, and then the former recounted the details of the discovery and capture of the prisoners. Otar scrutinized them both intently during Eudor's narration of events, his expression revealing naught of what passed in his brain behind those inscrutable eyes. When the officer had finished, the Jeddak fastened his gaze upon Ghek. "And you," he asked, "what manner of thing are you? From what country? Why are you in Manator?" "I am a Kaldane," replied Ghek, "the highest type of created creature upon the face of Barsoom. I am mind, you are matter. I come from Bantoom. I am here because we are lost and starving." "And you?" Otar turned suddenly to Tara. "You, too, are a Kaldane?" "I am Princess of Helium," replied the girl. "I was a prisoner in Bantoom. This Kaldane and a warrior of my own race rescued me. The warrior left us to search for food and water. He has doubtless fallen into the hands of your people. I ask you to free him and give us food and drink and let us go upon our way. I am a granddaughter of a Jeddak, the daughter of the Jeddak of Jeddaks, the warlord of Barsoom. I ask only the treatment that my people would accord you or yours." "Helium," replied Otar. "I know not of Helium, nor does the Jeddak of Helium rule Manator. I, Otar, am Jeddak of Manator. I alone rule, I protect my own. You have never seen a woman or a warrior of Manator captive in Helium. Why should I protect the people of another Jeddak? It is his duty to protect them. If he cannot, he is weak, and his people must fall into the hands of the strong. I, Otar, am strong. I will keep you. That," he pointed at Ghek. "Can it fight?" "It is brave," replied Tara of Helium, "but it has not the skill at arms which many people possess." "There is none, then, to fight for you?" asked Otar. "We are a just people," he continued without waiting for a reply. "And had you one to fight for you, he might win to freedom for himself and you as well. But Eudor assured me that no stranger ever had departed from Manator, she answered. Otar shrugged. That does not disprove the justice of the laws of Manator, replied Otar, but rather that the warriors of Manator are invincible. Had there come one who could defeat our warriors, that one had won to liberty. And you fetch my warrior. And you fetch my warrior, cried Tara haughtily. You see, such swordplay as doubtless his crumbling walls of our decaying city never have witnessed, and if there be no trick in your offer, we are already as good as free. Otar smiled more broadly than before, and Udar smiled too, and the chiefs and warriors who looked on nudged one another and whispered, laughing. And Tara of Helium knew then that there was trickery in their justice, but though her situation seemed hopeless, she did not cease to hope. For was she not the daughter of John Carter, warlord of Barsoom, whose famous challenge to fate, I still live, remained the one irreducible defense against despair? At thought of her noble sire, the patrician chin, the patrician chin of Tara of Helium rose a shade higher. Ah, if he but knew where she was, there were little then to fear. The hosts of Helium would battle at the gates of Manator. The great green warriors of John Carter's savage allies would swarm up from the Dead Sea bottoms, lusting for pillage and for loot. The stately ships of her beloved navy would soar above the unprotected towers, and minarets of the doomed city would not, which only capulation of the doomed city, which only capitulation and heavy tribute could then save. But John Carter did not know. There was only one other to whom she might hope to look, Taran the Panthan. But where was he? She had seen his sword in play, and she knew that he had been wielded by a master hand. And who should know swordplay better than Tara of Helium, who had learned it well under the constant tutorage of John Carter himself? Tricks she knew that discounted even far greater physical prowess than her own, and a method of attack that might have been at once the envy and despair of the cleverest of warriors. And so it was that her thoughts turned to Turin, the Panthan. Though not alone because of the protection he might afford her, she had realized, since he had left her in search of food, that there had grown between them a certain comradeship that she now missed. There had been that about him which seemed to have bridged the gulf between their stations in life. With him, she had failed to consider that he was a Panthan or that she was a princess. They had been comrades. Suddenly, she realized that she missed him for himself more than for his sword. She turned towards Otar. Where is Turin, my warrior? She demanded. You shall not lack for warriors, replied the Jeddak. One of your beauty will find plenty ready to fight for her. Possibly it shall not be necessary to look further than the Jeddak of Manator. You please me, woman. What say you to such an honor? Through narrowed lids, the Princess of Helium scrutinized the Jeddak of Manator, from feathered headdress to sandaled foot and back to feathered headdress. Honor? She mimicked in tones of scorn. I please thee, do I? Then know, swine, that thou pleaseth me not. That the daughter of John Carter is not for such as thou. A sudden tense silence fell upon the assembled chiefs. Slowly the blood receded from the sinister face of Otar, Jeddak of Manator, leaving him a sickly purple in his wrath. His eyes narrowed to two thin slits. His lips were comprised to the bloodless line of malevolence. For a long moment there was no sound in the throne room of the palace of Manator. Then the Jeddak turned upon Utor. Take her away, he said in a level voice that belayed his appearance of rage. Take her away, and at the next games let the prisoners and the common warriors play at Jatan for her. And this? Asked Udor, pointing to Gek. To the pits until the next game, replied Otar. So this is your vaunted justice, cried Tara of Helium, that two strangers who have not wronged you shall be sentenced without trial? And one of them is a woman, the swine of Manator, just as they are brave. Away with her, shouted Otar, and at a sign from Udar, the guards formed about the two prisoners and conducted them from the chamber. Outside the palace, Gek and Tara of Helium were separated. The girl was led through long avenues toward the center of the city and finally into a low building topped by lofty towers of massive construction. Here she was turned over to the warriors who wore the insignia of a dwar, or captain. "It is Otar's wish," explained Eudor to this one, "that she be kept until the next games. Then the prisoners and the common warriors shall play for her. Had she not the tongue of a thoat, she had been a worthy stake for our noblest steel." And Eudor sighed. "Perhaps even yet I may win a pardon for her. It were too bad to see such beauty fall to the lot of some common fellow. I would have honored her myself." "If I am to be imprisoned, imprison me," said the girl. "I do not recall that I was sentenced to listen to the insults of every low-born boor who chanced to admire me." "You see, Acor," replied Eudor, "the tongue that she has, even so and worse spoke she to Otar the Jetic." "I see," replied Acor, whom Tara saw was with difficulty restraining a smile. "Come, then, with me, woman," he said, "and we shall find a safe place within the towers of Jatan. But stay, what ails thee?" The girl had staggered and would have fallen had not the man caught her in his arms. She seemed to gather herself and then bravely sought to stand erect without support. Acor glanced at Eudor. "Knew you the woman was ill?" he asked. "Possibly it is lack of food," replied the other. "She mentioned, I believe, that she and her companions had not eaten for several days." "Brave are the warriors of Otar," sneered Acor, "lavish their hospitality. Eudor, whose riches are uncounted, and the brave Otar, whose squealing thoats enstabled within marble halls and fed from troughs of gold, can spare no crust to feed the starving girl." The black-haired Eudor scowled. "Thy tongue will yet pierce thy heart, son of a slave," he cried. "Once too often must thus try the patience of the just. Otar, hereafter guard thy speech as well as thy towers." "Think not to taunt me with my mother's state," said Acor. "'Tis the blood of the slave woman that fills my veins with pride, and my only shame is that I am also the son of thy Jetic." "And Otar heard this?" queried Eudor. "Otar has already heard it from my own lips," replied Acor. "This and more." He turned upon his heel, and supporting arms still around the waist of Tara of Helium, and thus he half led, half carried her into the towers of Jatan, while Eudor wheeled his thoat and galloped back in the direction of the palace. Within the main entrance to the tower of Jatan, while the half-dozen warriors, to one of these spoke Acor, keeper of the tower. "Fetch Lan-O, the slave girl, and bid her bring food and drink to the upper level of the Thurian tower." Then he lifted the half-fainting girl in his arms and bore her along the spiral inclined runway that led upward within the tower. Somewhere in the long ascent, Tara lost consciousness. When it returned, she found herself in a large circular chamber, the stone walls of which were pierced by windows at regular intervals about the entire circumference of the room. She was lying upon a pile of sleeping silks and furs, while there knelt above her a young woman who was forcing drops of some cooling beverage between her parched lips. Tara of Helium half rose upon an elbow and looked about. In the first moments of returning consciousness, there were swept from the scene a recollection of happenings in many weeks. She thought she had awoke in the palace of the warlord of Helium. Her brows knit as she scrutinized the strange face bending over her. "Who are you?" she asked, "and where is Euthea?" "I am Lan-O, the slave girl," replied the other. "I know none by the name of Euthea." Tara of Helium sat erect and looked about her. This rough stone was not the marble of her father's halls. "Where am I?" she asked. "In the Thurian tower," replied the girl, and then seeing that the other still did not understand, she guessed the truth. "You are a prisoner in the towers of Jatan in the city of Manator," she explained. "You were brought to this chamber, weak and fainting, by Acor, dwar of the towers of Jatan, who sent me to you with food and drink, for kind is the heart of Okar." Acor. "I remember now," said Tara slowly. "I remember. But where is Turin, my warrior? Did they speak of him?" "I heard not of another," replied Lan-O. "You alone were brought to the towers. In that you are fortunate, for there are no nobler men in Manator than Acor. It is his mother's blood that makes him so. She was a slave girl from Gathol." "Gathol!" exclaimed Tara of Helium. Lies Gathol close to Manator? Not close, yet still the nearest country, replied Lano. About 22 degrees east it lies. Gathol, murmured Tara. Far Gathol. But you are not from Gathol, said the slave girl. Your harness is not of Gathol. I am from Helium, said Tara. It is far from Helium to Gathol, said the slave girl. But in our studies we learn much of the greatness of Helium. We of Gathol, so it seems, not so far away. You, too, are from Gathol? Asked Tara. Many of us are from Gathol who are slaves in Manator, replied the girl. It is to Gathol nearest country that the Manatorians took for slaves most often. They go in great numbers at intervals of 3 or 7 years and hunt the roads that lead to Gathol, and thus they capture whole caravans, leaving none to bear warning of Gathol to their fate. Nor do they ever escape from Manator to carry word of us back to Gahan, our Jed. Tara of Helium ate slowly and in silence. The girl's words aroused memories of the last hour she spent in her father's palace, and the great midday function at which she had met Gahan of Gathol. Even now she flushed as she recalled his daring words. Upon her reveries the door opened and a burly warrior appeared in the opening, a hulking fellow with thick lips and an evil, leering face. The slave girl sprang to her feet facing him. What does this mean, Emed? She cried. Was it not the will of Acor that this woman be not disturbed? The will of Acor indeed, and the man sneered. The will of Acor is without power in the towers of Jatan, or else wherefore Acor now lies in the pits of Otar, and Emed is dwarf of the tower. Tara of Helium saw the face of the slave girl pale and the terror in her eyes. I'd be scared too. Missions, what's up? Sweet sultry voice. What's going on, brother? It's good to see you, brother. Hope you are doing well. Hope the heat is keeping you not dehydrated. That chapter was shorter than I thought it would be. Ah. Excellent. I love it. So this is the fifth book in the John Carter series, John Carter of Mars. This book is called The Chessmen of Mars, but we follow John Carter through becoming just some dude that landed on Mars to he's now the warlord of all of Barsoom, which is the Mars cities. Um, Now we're following his daughter because he ended up marrying Deja Thoris from Helium. So he is the Jedek of Jedeks now, kind of the top dog in charge. And his daughter was kidnapped by the wind, apparently, like a storm took her flyer way off course and dropped her in a far off land. And yeah, we're just following her adventures. But what's funny is Gahan of Gathol, for those that weren't here for the first half, he tried to, woo her at a party, and she was like, "You forget your place, sir," and kind of stood him up and sent him on his way. And he was like, I'm going to, I'm going to get her." And long story short, he kind of figured that she went up in the storm, so he kind of went up in the storm after her, and his flyer kind of landed close by, and he was able to discover her, he helped her escape. But he's all masked and armored up and stuff, and he was like, "Yeah, my name is Turin." So she's actually traveling with the jet of Gathol right now, and he is in a city of Gatholians. He can probably just off his mask and be like, "Let's get him." But she doesn't know that it's him, so she's like, "Man, I miss this guy, so familiar, and now I miss his companionship." So I have a feeling that this whole thing is going to end up playing like they're going to fall in love at the end. So, but on we go. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I would very much like to DM again because my dad, he was a DM So he taught me some things along the way, and then when my friends wanted to play, I DM'd once or twice, but I really enjoyed playing more than telling the story, because when you always know the story, then you never have surprises. So I liked other people to tell it. But I would love to write a campaign. All right, let's read our last chapter of the night, y'all, which is chapter 12. Geck plays pranks. Yeah, we should. We can do it virtually. Why not? I wouldn't mind that at all. Excellent. Yeah, I say you should. Even if it's never used, man, do it for you. And then just like expand it over time. I know Pokey Girl Jesse would be down to play some D&D. I know it. My dad, real quick, when he was a DM of his game, he was this little gnome. That was his character because he was a DM that traveled with his characters, and because he liked to be a part of the story too. And so I might do something like that. But he was this magical dwarf that also like controlled the timeline. So he would have this pointy stick that was magical, but all he had was a loincloth and a pointy stick. But he could do some incredible stuff when they got into trouble, just to kind of save the story. Yeah, his name was Fibar, and yeah, I had some great stories with that. Never played. You would like it because you like stories, especially one that you can be a part of. It's right up your alley. But let's hear how Geck plays pranks. Meanwhile, Geck is a Kaldane, which is two separate beings, a head and a body, and they're two separate beings. The Kaldane is the head and the mind and can detach and crawl around like a spider, and it can hook up to other, bodies whenever he needs a new body. And that's what Geck is. Geck helped them escape from that place because he really liked Tara's singing. So he decided to go with them, and he got captured as well. I'm going to need to know more. Like, why were you not allowed to speak of it? Geck plays pranks. While Tower of Helium was being led to the towers of Jatan, Geck was escorted to the pits beneath the palace where he was imprisoned in a dimly lit chamber. Here he found a bench and a table standing upon the dirt floor near a wall, and set in the wall several rings from which depended short lengths of chain. At the base of the walls were several holes in the dirt floor. These alone, of the several things he saw, interested him. Geck sat down upon the bench and waited in silence, listening. Presently the lights were extinguished. If Geck could have smiled, he would have then, for Geck could see as well in the dark as in the light. Better, perhaps. He watched the dark openings of the holes in the floor and waited. Presently he detected a change in the air about him. It grew heavy with a strange odor, and once again might Geck have smiled. Once again might Geck have smiled, could he have smiled. Let them replace all the air in the chamber with their most deadly fumes. It would be all the same to Geck, the Kaldane, who, having no lungs, required no air. With the Rykor, it might be different. Deprived of air, it would die. But if only a sufficient amount of gas was introduced to stupefy the ordinary creature, it would have no effect upon the Rykor, who had no objective mind to overcome, so long as the excess of carbon dioxide in the blood was not sufficient to prevent heart action. The Rykor would suffer only a diminution of vitality. It would still respond to the exciting agency of the Kaldane's brain. Geck caused the Rykor to assume a sitting position with its back against the wall where it might remain without detection from its brain. Then he released his contact with its spinal cord, but remained in position upon its shoulders, waiting and watching, for the Kaldane's curiosity was aroused. He had not long to wait before the lights were flashed on, and one of the locked doors opened to admit a half-dozen warriors. They approached him rapidly and worked quickly. First they removed all his weapons, and then snapped a fetter about one of the Rykor's ankles, secured him to the end of one of the chains hanging from the walls. Next they dragged the long table to a new position, and there bolted it to the floor so that An end, instead of the middle, was directly before the prisoner. On the table before him they sat food and water, and upon the opposite end of the table they laid the key to the fetter. Then they unlocked and opened all the doors and departed. When Turin the Panthan regained consciousness, it was to the realization of the sharp pain in one of his forearms. The effects of the gas departed him rapidly as they had overcome him, so that as he opened his eyes he was in full possession of his faculties. The lights were on again, and in their glow there was revealed to the man the figure of a giant Martian rat crouching upon the table, gnawing upon his arm. Snatching his arm away, he reached for a short sword, while the rat, growling, sought to seize his arm again. It was then that Turin discovered that his weapons had been removed: short sword, long sword, dagger, and pistol. The rat charged him then, and striking the creature away with his hand, the man rose and backed off, searching for something with which to strike a harder blow. Again the rat charged, and as Turin stepped back quickly to avoid the menacing jaws, something seemed to jerk suddenly upon his right ankle. And as he drew his left foot back to regain his equilibrium, his heel caught upon the taut chain, and he fell backward to the floor just as the rat leaped upon his breast and sought his throat. The Martian rat is a fierce and unlovely thing. It has many-legged and hairless. Its hide resembles that of a newborn's mouse in repulsiveness. In size and weight, it is comparable to a large Airedale terrier, as its eyes are small and close-set and almost hidden in deep fleshy apertures. But its most ferocious and repulsive feature is its jaws, the entire bony structure of which protrudes several inches beyond the flesh, revealing 5 sharp, spade-like teeth in the upper jaw and the same number of similar teeth in the lower, the whole suggesting the appearance of rotting face from which much of the flesh had sloughed away. It was such a thing that leaped upon the breast of the Panthan to tear at his jugular. Twice Turin struck it away as he sought to regain his feet. Both times it returned with increased ferocity to renew the attack. Its only weapons are its jaws, since its broad splayed feet are armed with blunt talons. With its protruding jaws it excavates its winding burrows, and with its broad feet it pushes the dirt behind it. To keep the jaws from his flesh, then, was Turin's only concern, and this he succeeded in doing until chance gave him a hold upon the creature's throat. After that the end was but a matter of moments. Rising at last, he flung the lifeless thing from him with a shudder of disgust. Now he turned his attention to a hurried inventory of the new conditions which surrounded him since the moment of his incarceration. He realized vaguely what had happened. He had been anesthesiaed and stripped of his weapons, and as he rose to his feet he saw one ankle was fettered to a chain in the wall. He looked about the room. All the doors swung wide open. His captors would render his imprisonment the more cruel by leaving ever one. His captors would render his imprisonment the more cruel by leaving ever before him tempting glimpses of open aisles to the freedom he could not attain. Upon the end of the table, and within easy reach, was food and drink. This at least was attainable, and at sight of it his starved stomach seemed almost to cry aloud for sustenance. It was with difficulty that he ate and drank in moderation. As he devoured the food, his eyes wandered about the confines of his prison until suddenly they seized upon a thing that lay on the end of the table farthest from him. It was a key. He raised to his feet. He raised his fettered ankle and examined the lock. There could be no doubt of it. The key that lay there on the table before him was the key to that very lock. A careless warrior had laid it there and departed, forgetting. Hope surged high in the breast of Gahan of Gathol, of Turin of the Panthan. Furtively, his eyes sought the open doorways. There was no one in sight. If he could but gain his freedom, he would find some way from this odious city back to her side, and never again would he leave her until he had won safety for her or death for himself. He rose and moved cautiously toward the opposite end of the table where lay the coveted key. The fettered ankle halted his first step, but he stretched at full length along the table, extending eager fingers toward the prize. They almost laid hold upon it. A little more, and they would touch it. He strained and stretched, but still the thing lay just beyond his reach. He hurled himself forward until the iron fetter bit deep into his flesh, but all futility. He sat back upon the bench then and glared at the open doors and the key, realizing now that they were part of a well-laid scheme of refined torture, none that less demoralizing because it inflicted no physical suffering. For just a moment the man gave way to useless regret and foreboding. Then he gathered himself together, his brows cleared, and he returned to his unfinished meal. At least they should not have the satisfaction of knowing how sorely they had hit him. As he ate, it occurred to him that by dragging the table along the floor he could bring the key within his reach. So when he essayed to do so, he found that the table had been securely bolted to the floor during the period of his unconsciousness. Again Gahan smiled and shrugged and resumed his eating. The warriors had departed from the prison in which Gek was confined. The Kaldane crawled from the shoulders of the Rykor to the table. Here he drank a little water and then directed the hands of the Rykor to the balance of it and to the food, upon which the brainless thing fell with avidity. While it was thus engaged, Gek took his spider-like way along the table to the opposite end where lay the key to the fetter. Seizing it in his chalet, he leaped to the floor and scurried rapidly towards the mouth of one of the burrows against the wall, to which he disappeared. For long had the brain been contemplating these burrows' entrances. They appealed to his Kaldane tastes. And further, they pointed a hiding place for the key, and the lair for only the kind of food the Kaldane relished is flesh and blood. Gek had never seen an ulsio, since these great Martian rats had long ago disappeared from Bantoom, their flesh and blood having been greatly relished by the Kaldanes. But Gek had inherited, almost unimpaired, every memory of every ancestor, and so he knew that ulsio inhabited these layers, and that ulsio was good to eat, and he knew what ulsio looked like and what its habits were, though he had never seen them nor any picture of him. As we breed animals for the transmission of physical attributes, so the Kaldanes breed themselves for the transmission of attributes of the mind, including memory and the power of recollection. And thus have they raised what we term instinct above the level of the threshold of the objective mind, where it may be commanded and utilized by recollection. Doubtless in our own subjective minds lie many of the imprisoned impressions and experiences of our forebears. These may impinge upon our consciousness in dreams only, or in vague, haunting suggestions that we have before experienced, some transient phase of our present existence. Well, if we had but the power to recollect them, before us would unfold the forgotten story of the lost eons that have preceded us. We might even walk with God in the garden of his stars while man was still in the budding idea within his mind. Gek descended into the burrow at the steep incline for some 10 feet, when he found himself in an elaborate and delightful network of burrows. The Kaldane was elated. This indeed was life. He moved rapidly and fearlessly as he went, and straight into his goal as you could to the kitchen of your own house. This goal lay in low level of the spherical cavity, about the size of a large barrel. Here, in a nest of torn bits and silks of fur, lay 6 baby ulsios. When the mother returned, there were but 5 babies and a great spider creature, which she immediately sprang to attack, only to be met by powerful Chile, which seized and held her so that she could not move. Slowly they dragged her throat toward the hideous mouth, and in a little moment she was dead. Gek might have remained in the nest for a long time, since there was so simple food for many days. But he did not do so. Instead, he explored the burrows. He followed them into many subterranean chambers of the city of Manitor and upward through the walls to rooms above the ground. He found many ingenious devised traps, and he found poisoned food and other signs of constant battle that the inhabitants of Manitor waged against these repulsive creatures that dwelt beneath their homes and public buildings. His exploration revealed not only the vast proportions of the network of runways that apparently traversed every portion of the city, but the great antiquity of the majority of them. Tons upon tons of dirt must have been removed, and for a long time he wondered where it had been deposited, until the following downward, a tunnel of great size and length, he sensed before him the thunderous rush of subterranean water, and presently came to the bank of a great underground river, tumbling onward, no doubt, the length of the world to the buried sea of Omine. Into this torrential sewer had unthinkable generations of Ulsios pushed their hands full of dirt in the excavating of their vast labyrinth. For only a moment did Ghek tarry between the river, for his seemingly aimless wanderings were in reality prompted by a definite purpose, and this he pursued with vigor and singleness of design. He followed such runways as appeared to terminate in the pits or other chambers the inhabitants of the city, and these he explored, usually from the safety of a burrow's mouth, until satisfied that what he sought was not there. He moved swiftly upon his spider legs and covered remarkable distances in short periods of time. His search not being rewarded with immediate success, he decided to return to the pit where his rykor lay chained look and look to its wants. As he approached the end of the burrow that terminated in the pit, he slackened his pace, stopping just within the entrance of the runway that he might scan the interior of the chamber before entering it. As he did so, he saw the figure of a warrior appear suddenly in the opposite doorway. The rykor sprawled upon the table, his hands groping blindly for more food. Ghek saw the warrior pause and gaze in sudden astonishment at the rykor. He saw the fellow's eyes go wide, and in ashen hue replace the copper bronze of his cheek. He stepped back as though someone had struck him in the face. For an instant only he stood thus, as in paralysis of fear. Then he uttered a smothered shriek and turned and fled. Again, was it a catastrophe that Ghek the Chaldean could not smile? Quickly entering the room, he crawled to the tabletop and fixed himself to the shoulders of his rykor, and there he waited. And who may say that Ghek thought he could not smile, possessed not a sense of humor? For a half hour he sat there, and then there came to him the sound of a man approaching along the corridors of stone. He could hear their arms clank against the rocky walls, and he knew that they came at rapid pace. But just before they reached the entrance to his prison, they paused and advanced more slowly. In the lead was an officer, and just behind him, wide-eyed and perhaps still a little ashen, the warrior who had so recently departed in haste. At the doorway they halted, and the officer turned sternly upon the warrior. With upraised finger he pointed at Ghek. "There sits the creature. Didst thou dare lie then to thy dwar?" "I swear," cried the warrior, "that I spoke the truth. But a moment since the thing grovelled headless upon this very table. And may my first ancestor strike me dead upon the spot if I speak other than a true word." The officer looked puzzled. The men of Mars seldom, if ever, lie. He scratched his head, and then he addressed Ghek. "How long have you been here?" he said. "Who knows better than those who placed me here and chained me to the wall?" he returned in reply. "Saw you this warrior enter here a few minutes since?" "I saw him," replied Ghek. "And you sat there where you sit now?" continued the officer. "Look thou to my chain, and tell me then, where else might I sit?" cried Ghek. "Art the people of thy city all fools?" Three other warriors pressed behind the two in front, craning their necks to view the prisoner, while they grinned at the discomfiture of their fellow. The officer scowled at Ghek. "Thy tongue is as venomous as that of she-banth Otar sent to the tower of Jatan." The she-banth. "You speak of the young woman who was captured with me?" asked Ghek, his expressionless monotone and face revealing naught of interest he felt. "I speak of her," replied the dwarf, and then turning to the warrior who had summoned him, "Return to thy quarters and remain there until the next game. Perhaps by that time thy eyes may have learned not to deceive thee." The fellow cast a venomous glance at Ghek and turned away. The officer shook his head. "I do not understand it," he muttered. "Always has Yuvan been a true and dependable warrior. Could it be?" He glanced piercingly at Ghek. "Thou hast a strange head that misfits thy body, fellow," he cried. "Our legends tell us of those ancient creatures that placed hallucinations upon the mind of their fellow. If thou be such, then maybe Yuvan suffered from thy forbidden power. If thou be such, Otar will know well how to deal with thee." He wheeled about and motioned his warriors to follow him. Wait, cried Ghek. Unless I am to be starved, send me food. You have had food, replied the warrior. Am I to be fed but once a day? Asked Ghek. I require food oftener than that. Send me food. You shall have food, replied the officer. None may say that the prisoners of Manitor are ill fed. Just are the laws of Manitor. And he departed. No sooner had the sounds of their passing died away in the distance that Glek clambered from the shoulders of his rykor, and scurried into the burrow where he had hidden the key. Fetching it, he unlocked the fetter from the creature's ankle, locked it empty, and carried the key farther down into the burrow. Then he returned to his place upon the brainless servitor. The brainless servitor. After a while he heard footsteps approaching, whereupon he rose and passed into another corridor from that down which he knew the warrior was coming. Here he waited out of sight, listening. He heard the man enter the chamber and halt. He heard a murmur of exclamation, followed by a jangle of metal dishes, as a slaver was slammed upon the table. Then rapidly retreating footsteps, which quickly died away into the distance. Ghek lost no time in returning to the chamber, recovering the key, relocking the rykor to his chain. Then he replaced the key in the burrow, and squatting on the table beside his headless body, directed his hands towards the food. While the rykor ate, Ghek listened for the scraping sandals and clattering arms that he knew soon would come. Nor had he long to wait. Ghek scrambled to the shoulders of his rykor as he heard them coming. Again it was the officer who had been summoned by Yuvan, and with him were 3 warriors. The one directly behind him was evidently the same who had brought the food, for his eyes went wide when he saw Ghek sitting at the table, and he looked very foolish as the dwarf turned his stern glance upon him. It is even as I said, he cried. He was not here when I brought his food. But he is here now, said the officer grimly, and his fetter is locked about his ankle. Look, it has not been opened. But where's the key? It should be upon the table at the end opposite him. Where's the key, creature? He shouted at Ghek. How should I, a prisoner, know better than my jailer the whereabouts of the key to my fetters? He retorted. But it lay here, cried the officer, pointing to the other end of the table. Did you see it? Asked Ghek. His officer hesitated. No, but it must have been there, he parried. Did you see the key lying there? Asked Ghek, pointing to another warrior. The fellow shook his head negatively. And you? And you? Continued the Chaldean, addressing the others. They both admitted that they had never seen the key. And if it had been there, and how could I have reached it? He continued. No, he could not have reached it, admitted the officer. But there shall be no more of this. Izav, you will remain here on guard with this prisoner until you are relieved. Izav looked anything but happy at this intelligence was transmitted to him, and he eyed Ghek suspiciously as the dwarf and the other warrior turned and left him to his unhappy lot. Ghek's got a sense of humor. Tip-top games. RPGs are always fun. I has a really short attention span and had played it once. I wasn't a fan. Yeah, it's all about the company, really. It's less about the story and what you're doing and the dice rolling and the minifigs. It is all about the company that you keep and making memories in a fantastical world where literally anything can happen. And how well you do this thing relies on how high a dice roll you do. Hello, Cool Joy. It is really good to see you, Laura. We are going to stop, fittingly, at chapter 13 tonight. But real quick, I'm just going to take a look, because if there's only 13 chapters in the book, then we're probably just going to do it. Okay, there is a chapter 13, 14, 15, and 16. Cool. $19, $20. Yeah, we have at least 2 more sessions of Yep, 2 more reading sessions of the Chessmen of Mars at least, maybe 3. I didn't realize that this book was so long. Yep. Let's see, there are 22 chapters, and we just hit chapter 13. Okay, yeah, we're right on par. Ready Player One. Yes, I have seen it. I haven't read it. Matt just wanted to go to the beach. Yeah, I can see that. Plus, you can only imagine what you can do now because there's things like projectors and stuff, and I've seen like projectors that like shine down on the table and you have your whole map and it's animated and your little characters are moving. Oh yeah, I most definitely would. In fact, we started reading on Wednesdays also missions in Discord though. So Wednesday we jump in Discord and we can really read any book we want to in there because it's not archived, so copyrights don't really count. So we're actually reading through the Chronicles of Narnia right now, and Jessie is helping me read so far. She's the only one that wanted to read with me, so we are going chapter for chapter, and yeah, we're all in there together, and we can all talk to each other between chapters and stuff, and it's become kind of like an accidental book club. Binge read it in 2 days because I was so addicted to it. I've had books like that. The Dragonlance Chronicles were the ones that I fell into, and I cannot wait because I want to read those to you guys. The Dragonlance Chronicles. The what? Of Narnia? The Chronicles of Narnia? Yeah. It's actually 7 books in that series too, and man, I powerhoused through The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in like 2 sessions. So yeah, we started reading Prince Caspian. Oh, while we finish up here, y'all, one, really appreciate you guys hanging out, reading with me tonight. Hope I gave you a little bit of time to relax and forget about the woes of the day and the week to come. I'm going to find somebody that we can bless with a raid. Got the Hollow Hunters. ALB, why is he streaming on a Monday? Jay's Corner. Alright, well, I've been neglecting my boys, so we'll go and see the Hollow Hunters. There we go, classic, yeah. So if you are, same bat time, man, if you're not doing anything Wednesday and want to jump into the Storytime voice channel at Discord, and you can listen to the story, chat about some stuff, and yeah, I think that would be the first time that we've actually talked outside of one of us having to type. So yeah, be pretty cool. Yeah, excellent. And yes, thank you, Jesse. I appreciate you popping in. Everybody hanging out in the background, lurking, or maybe you're sleeping at this point, which is always fine. That is the intended effect. So, but I really, really appreciate everybody here. No, tomorrow. So Tuesday's for me. So I'm gonna paint some more tomorrow. But Wednesday is the next read. That's gonna be Narnia. But yeah. I don't know if I can throw in an additional day with Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. Today is Monday. Yeah, I know. Yes, appreciate you definitely, and y'all, thanks so much. I'm gonna get some dinner. Gonna hunker down. I'm going to hug my dog, and then I'm gonna watch something and eat some dinner. But really, really appreciate y'all, and always remember to go out and get everything that you set out to get, and don't let anything stop you. But it takes $0 to be a good person. So always do it through peace, love, and Pokemon. And thank you all for believing in ghosts. For those going to bed, have a great night. Much love. And I will see you around, if not tomorrow, For anybody hanging around, let's go and raid the Hollow Hunters. Little Pokey Ghost reading raid, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Somewhere, I'm sure. Love you all. Peace.